Hi, everyone. I am recording this podcast, It Depends episode live from KubeCon in Excel Center, London. I have the honor of having my good friend Salma on this episode. Salma and I met up 1 month ago when we were at the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in Orlando. I was really heartened to see that a space that's near and dear to my heart, data observability, is having its moment. I feel that it was a bit of a shaky start getting out of the door, but now I'm hearing a lot of customer success stories, and I'm really happy to see that this space has taken off. Salma is co-founder, CEO of a very exciting company in the space called Sifflet. She's based out of Paris, and without stealing any more thunder, Salma, so happy that you could join this episode.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. I'm very happy to make this episode happen finally.
Perfect. Thank you. So, Salma, let's start with some introduction. Can you please give us, you have a very exciting global background. You work in investment banking, and I'm in awe of all the stuff you've done. So please walk us through the history of how you got to starting your company. Why is it called Sifflet?
Yeah, of course. So I have an engineering degree, applied maths and statistics, in Paris, and then I moved to Hong Kong to start my career in an investment bank.
Mhm.
I joined a new team, a new business, and really we didn't have much of a roadmap or guideline in the beginning. We just were told that the ambition was to build a new product that does algo trading.
Mhm.
And so it was very exciting, and I started as a machine learning engineer, and kind of evolved from that, with and kind of with the business, to build a platform that was doing, systematic trading, and kind of servicing a lot of global customers, and become a really, core product of the bank's offering. So that's how I got started. And then as part of my responsibilities, as you can imagine, there's a lot of research and building and deploying of the models, and then trading on behalf of the models and all that. But there is a big, less exciting aspect, which is reporting to the regulator, reporting internally, making sure that we're not in breaches of any, like risk controls and all that. And so when you have data quality issues, that can become extremely challenging.
Yep.
And so that's how, I personally had a first row seat to everything that can go wrong in a data platform, a relatively modern data platform, actually. And that's what, got me excited about the space. And I realized that this was such a big problem that a lot of companies were facing, and nobody really had an answer to it. So that's kind of what motivated the initial thinking behind Sifflet. And Sifflet means whistle in French.
Listen.
That's kind of, yes, that's overshadowing to, the alerting part in the product. But also because our ambition in the beginning was to build a tool that was going to act as a referee of the data platform, and
Hmm.
make sure that, if there needs to be a yellow card or a red card, or that essentially the data was the bad data was being quarantined and all that. So that's the thinking behind the name.
That is amazing. And I love the fact that you actually witnessed and you lived through these problems that you are now trying to solve. And that's the best of both worlds, where you've been a practitioner and you know there's a gap that needs to be filled.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I started as a practitioner and someone who was working with data every day,
Yeah.
and building data products. But also towards kind of like later in my career, I was also a business leader and responsible for the products for business from a business perspective. So I had empathy for the practitioners, but I
Hmm.
also had, the responsibility of the business leader to make sure that, we got our act together around data quality that makes sense. So it definitely gives me, empathy for the folks
Yeah.
we work with today.
So one of the interesting things that has crossed my mind as I was preparing for this podcast and I was down into the expo hall at KubeCon, every other company is doing something with what they call observability data. As opposed to data observability, it's reverse. And
Yeah.
this is a line that has been going on for years because Splunk started it, then Datadog, New Relic, App Dynamics. There's so many companies in this space. Now there are new ones like CloudFuse. So
Yeah.
some of these companies are billion-dollar companies. I had anticipated that data observability by this time would be a much bigger market because companies care about their data more than the infrastructure. I mean, they care about infrastructure, but a lot of infrastructure is now run by hyperscalers. But why is data observability not at the same level as observability data? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it's actually funny enough, and a question that I get a lot from
Mhm.
investors and people in the space in general. It's really interesting to draw the parallel between what you call observability data, or the output of application software monitoring and observability platforms like Datadog, Splunk, New Relic, etc., and observability of the data, which is the space that we're in. And I think that analogy is very important because it does explain a lot, this whole evolution that's taken place in the data space of trying to emulate some of software best practices, and kind of recreating the DevOps persona, but really in the data space. But I think it's important to keep in mind that it's two relatively different products, and two different purposes. So let me dive in. So if the way I look at it, is let's look at how software observability kind of became a category, and why all these amazing companies were able to build the businesses that they built and service the customers that they did. So if you look at the early 2010, internet revolution, cloud was taking off, cloud applications were kind of the child of the internet, and companies started building applications on the cloud to modernize their businesses, and to become software companies. I think we can all remember, I think it was Microsoft CEO who's very famous for saying that every company wants to become a software company back in
Yeah.
the day. So that was kind of the main goal and the main item on the agenda for a lot of business leaders and CEOs and CTOs, etc. And so people started building cloud applications, and then cloud applications became, in production, became products, running businesses, and whatnot. And so, as that adoption matured, people started to realize that, okay, well, now these things are in production. We need observability, security monitoring. We need to make sure that we can observe the outputs of these different applications, so that we can get ahead of the problems that may cause disruption to these applications. And that's how, Datadog, Splunk, New Relic, and all these amazing companies, kind of took center stage, and solved this problem at scale for a lot of companies. Um, Fast forward to, later in the decade when Snowflake came out, and the modern data stack started to become a thing. It's important to keep in mind the kind of the history lesson here, for lack of better words. There is a whole industry and a whole shift that took place with the internet that led to companies being software companies, and then going to their next stage of evolution, which is using data, producing data, treating data as a product. So in a way, that explains the difference in maturity between the two markets, aka software and data observability. um, but I think, if we go back to that, kind of history lesson, when Snowflake came out, and kind of revolutionized the way companies can store data at scale, and kind of do it in a more scalable and elastic way, the modern data stack kind of took off around it, and it was a way for companies to really operationalize, the analytics workflow, right? Because
Yeah.
by that time, every company was already, to an extent, a software company.
Yeah.
And the next stage was, okay, now let's become a data company,
Yeah.
right? So naturally, there's kind of a hierarchy in the development cycle, and in the kind of, say, the software evolution cycle. And so, fast forward to where we are now, where data is a transactional product.
Yeah.
Companies, have a variety of business use cases that are critical to drive efficiency, to differentiate, to do customer support, and that are really extremely and heavily tied to core businesses and to revenue and growth and all that. Data is a transactional product, right? And so, but it's important to keep in mind that there is a whole industry, which is what now is known as the modern data stack, that needed to exist, mature, have tools that are tightly integrated and serve different use cases for data to actually become a product, right? So now we're there, which means that back to your question about software observability and the comparison, now we're in the equivalent of like 2010 to 2015 in software. Okay, now we're a similar stage in data. And now with AI, that stage is actually even more accelerated, and that timeline is being shrunk, right? But we are now at a stage where every company needs to be a data company, where observability, security, privacy, monitoring in data are becoming extremely critical. And so that's what led to data observability as a category, not only becoming more legitimate and more mature, but becoming a business critical solution for a lot of companies that are striving to become data companies. Tell me.
So this is amazing. So this actually takes me to the next question: that what is the scope of data observability? Because you said, and I 100% agree with you, because we are in the age of AI. We need to train models. Models need data. But that data we need to observe and know, like, is this data of high quality? Is it reliable? Is there security or toxic information there? What is the cost? So what is the scope of data observability? Is it all of that, or is it a subset of that?
Yeah. Again, I love that you started this conversation with talking about software observability and the analogy between the two spaces. I think today, if you go and ask someone in the software industry to describe what Datadog does, I don't think they'll be able to tell you exactly what it does, because it does so many things, right? And the expectation from technology leaders when they get an APM or software monitoring solution is for it to serve as many purposes as possible, because the stage at which these companies and these products are is no longer just about building and scaling products, but it's about having a technology that can collect as much, using the term you used earlier, that collects as much observability data, right? By intimately connecting to the software infrastructure, and then use that data, that observability data, to serve it in use cases. Whether those use cases are, application monitoring or cost monitoring or security or privacy or whatever that might be. But it comes down to the core technology that these vendors were able to build that allowed them to not only build products, but scale products, right? So I think, and as I said, data observability is a space that's maturing, in my opinion, much faster than, what we've seen in software observability over the past decade. And obviously I'm super biased, but I do think it's supposed to be a bigger space, because
couldn't agree more with you.
Right, we keep producing more data, we keep creating more data products, the use cases are multiplying every year. Nobody's going out there and multiplying the number of applications that they create, if that makes sense.
I have another point of view, by the way. When people write software, I know writing software is complicated, but software does not change. Once it's written, you can run it a million times, but data is dysfunctional. Data changes all the time. It doesn't ask for permission, it just changes. And so it's a much harder problem to observe data than it is to observe software. And that's why I'm very upbeat about this category. So.
Absolutely. And also talking about the value chain of software and application creation, data is much closer to the business than applications. And so naturally there's a lot more, use cases, applications,
Yeah,
and ways people want to use it because it's much closer to the end user, and it's much more open for interpretation than
yeah,
software is, if that makes sense,
complete.
right?
Yes,
Um,
100%. Yeah,
mm-mm.
yeah.
So to answer your question on what is data observability, um, I can tell you, yes, data observability is the ability to look into a data platform, look at the pipelines, the
Mhm.
metadata, the lineage, and detect anomalies and all of that good stuff. But I think this is a description you find on any data observability vendor's websites. So I want to take a different approach and kind of tell you, why tools like Sifflet exist, and
Hmm.
why I think we will continue to exist for the next few years. Is because in essence, how Sifflet was built is to collect as much observability data about the data platform, right? So the way we connect to different connectors, we collect information about, logs, about metadata, about, the code, about the jobs, about a lot of different intricacies of a data platform, and how the data is being created, transported, used, consumed, transformed, etc. And we serve it in use cases,
Hmm.
right? The
Yeah,
use case today is anomaly detection for data, metadata pipelines. We do some data governance aspect as well. We do some data discovery use cases as well. We want to go into data privacy and security. I mean, and the options are endless. But I do think part of what makes data observability a confusing category for a lot of people is that we know that software observability exists. We
yeah.
know that software observability allowed vendors to create so many use cases because they did such a good job at building a technology. And we know that that's likely how things are going to end up becoming for software observability as well. And so everyone is saying, oh, yeah, you have the information to do cost monitoring already. So why don't you serve it in a use case? Or
Hmm.
you have information to detect, breaches about potential breaches in the data. So why don't you serve that use case? Or you have
Yeah.
the information to go into AI governance. So why don't you serve that use case? So to answer your question, I think it's a category that keeps defining itself and keeps changing. The core principles are, we are vendors that have access to a lot of things within a data platform that can be served in interesting use cases. Um, Today, those use cases are making sure, or one of those use cases are making sure that folks get visibility over how the pipelines are working, how the data and the metadata is behaving, and they can build reliable data products.
You touched upon something that is near and dear to my heart. So you've called on twice, 2 times now, data observability as a category. That's a premise we had, but then at some point we heard, no, it's not a category, it's a capability. So my question to you is, do you see it as a category? There are so many players now that hint, hint, Gartner should create a magic quadrant on data observability, but they are launching a new magic quadrant called metadata management. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts? Is it a category, and what is the overlap with metadata management?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I do think that a lot of this overlap and confusion
Mhm.
around data observability and what it should do comes down to the fact that I think often we confuse use cases and expectation from a product and technology and the product and technology itself. I'll give you a concrete example. When we started Sifflet a bit over 3 years ago now, everyone was so confused. They were like, oh, you want to be data lineage and data quality and data
Hmm.
catalog in one
Hmm.
product? And we kept saying, no, 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 these are just technology building blocks and product building blocks. We're building a data observability platform.
Hmm.
And guess what? Our DNA is monitoring. But we need the data quality component because that's how we're going to do anomaly detection and know what's wrong. We need lineage because we need to make sure that there's a chain reaction that gets created, right? So with cause analysis, system management, we need some data discovery aspects. We're not a data catalog, but we need to know the documentation of the data assets. We need to allow, people to bring existing documentation, document the assets, add the tags and whatever they need to make sure that the data also has a business context, not just a technical context. And so for a while, our main messaging was, we're not three products in one. We're one product, right? We're using three different building blocks to serve one use case. Okay. So that's what I mean by the confusion around this whole space, and why it makes it so hard to decipher. Now, in terms of metadata management and data observability and all those things, I think if you look at the traditional definition of metadata management, the way Gartner puts it, I think it encapsulates a lot of concepts around the lineage and active metadata and search and all the traditional stuff you find in a data catalog or a data lineage solution, for lack of better words. You find also some traditional data quality, in the MDM sense of thing, if that makes sense, even in the way metadata management is defined by Gartner. But I do think data observability is a whole different ballgame. And to answer your question, it is a category in and out of itself.
So, Salma, the problem I see from customers is that they're overwhelmed because they have a tool that does, let's say, data movement, change data, capture something. They have a tool that does data integration. They have a tool that is for catalog. And catalog also, like there's a technical catalog, there's a business catalog. Then you've got self-service data preparation. Then you have data quality observability. Maybe a different tool for lineage, like a special tool for lineage, or another tool for data quality remediation. And so the clients are like, well, how many tools can I integrate? So any thoughts on how the space is going to simplify the lives of customers?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I know for a while, a big debate that was going on in the data practitioner, landscape was the whole debate around bundling, debundling, unbundling, of the data stack and the different applications that, make the modern data stack what it is today. And I do think that, it's one of those topics where it might be very true for one type of technology, and you're going to be completely missing the points on another type of technology. I do think monitoring falls as a top of stack layer, so not a layer that's not one of the compartments of the data stack, but rather a top of stack layer, is more, inclined to benefit and to take advantage of the bundling, and and where I think we'll see, again, putting my ex-banker hat on, where I think we'll see a lot of M&A activity, because there is a few, to your point, like for a while there has been data lineage solutions emerging, and then data catalog solutions emerging, and then metric stores emerging, and then now AI governance emerging, and data observability and data quality and pre-warehouse and post-warehouse, and a lot of different approaches that I do think were the results of how the adoption around different compartments of the data stack evolved, right? So for example, if you start with the data warehouse, then you would naively maybe think that you just use monitoring for the data warehouse, and then you end up with 20 use cases and 100 people looking at the data platform, and so you're like, oh shit, now I need something that goes end to end. And so that's what created like these niche solutions and point solutions for each type of use case. But I'm a firm believer in the fact, and back to what I said earlier about data observability being a category, is as the stack beneath us matures, and as applications are more and more integrated, there's a few very different and very mature vendors in each category. If you look at integration, if you look at transformation, if you look at data warehousing, data lakes, BI, etc. So where we come in is kind of, as I said, as a top of stack layer to all of this, and we benefit from that space being more and more well integrated. But we also benefit from the fact that now customers and enterprises have a lot of choice when it comes to those tools, right?
Correct.
And so in a lot of cases, for example, we have many customers that are customers of Snowflake and Databricks, and have some BigQuery, and have some Oracle. right? So naturally, as that top of stack layer, the more comprehensive we are in terms
Yeah,
of offering, the better it is to serve that monitoring promise for the
yeah,
customer, if that makes sense.
yeah,
As opposed to the components of the data stack, right? If you're doing data movement, or if you're doing data modeling, or if you're doing data warehousing, then you better be hyper specialized, because that's what the customer needs you to be doing. They need you to be the best in class for data transformation.
yeah,
When you're looking
yeah,
at monitoring, the more everywhere you are, or the broader your offering is, the better it is going to be for the customer, because your promise is to make sure that everything is running smoothly. So naturally, as a customer, I need you to be everywhere. If that makes
yeah.
sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I really like the distinction you've made between hyper specialized tools versus a broader tools. So I want to pivot to your product. And I want to ask you, where do you see strengths of Sifflet? How is Sifflet architected, and what are the different capabilities?
So let me take you back to our starting point when we started Sifflet. So when we started Sifflet with my co-founders, and we have somewhat of similar backgrounds. So we all three of us have been or have faced data quality issues in a variety of roles, capacities, and scale of enterprises as well. And so when we sat down and we thought about, when we started thinking about building a product, our starting point was, okay, we can all, the three of us, agree, and obviously we spoke to hundreds of data practitioners. We can all agree, the consensus is that data quality is not just a technical problem, right? And it certainly is not just the responsibility of the data engineer. Okay, as data becomes a transactional product, um, there is a lot more people around the table that you need to answer to when it comes to data quality, right? And so instead of going into those endless debates of shift left, shift right, data quality this, data quality that, and back to what I said, in us considering monitoring and observability as a top of stack layer, naturally you need to sit between both, and you need to answer to both, if that makes sense. So that was our starting point, and that's what today makes, like what differentiates to Cplay in the market, and what makes us stand out is that we take a data asset. Obviously, we put it in its technical context, so we lean into the metadata, the logs, the lineage, the code, and a lot of other components. But more importantly, we add business context and documentation, so that we're no longer just looking at schemas and tables and drifts and pipelines, but we're looking at business processes and business critical pipelines and business critical data products. And so that makes monitoring more of a like a purposeful exercise. And it helps data teams also prioritize when it comes to where do you want to get started with monitoring and triaging and root cause analysis and all that good stuff that happens, when you're bringing in a framework for observability. So that's the Sifflet approach in a nutshell. And so naturally, we sit or we serve two different personas. So the data engineers, or what we say, or we call the data producers, and the data consumers. That's also one of our strengths, is that we bring visibility around data quality and data visibility also to the very end user, regardless of how technical they are. But we also bring back the information from the business all the way to the engineer, so that they can get smarter and more efficient about how they allocate resources to monitoring and resolution and triaging and all that.
So, I'm also curious. There are many ways to observe data. You can observe data at a very granular level, the values of
Yeah.
data, or you can look at just the metadata, or you can look at the logs. What are the different approaches Sifflet uses to gather this information and observe?
Yeah, absolutely. So to your point, yes, there is a few approaches. You can look at like a metadata-based approach. You can do like a log-based and like a pipeline-aware, for lack of better words, approach. You can look at data sampling and profiling and all that good stuff. Sifflet does a mix of all that, because, as I mentioned in the beginning, we do consider monitoring to be, a top of stack layer and a type of product where the more use cases you cover, the more holistic of a coverage you bring. So to kind of go into a bit more detail, if you look at just, pure metadata based monitoring, meaning you're going to look at schemas and look at row counts and timestamps and freshness, and you're not actually reading the data, then yeah, of course, that's something that today is covered under Sifflet, it's covered under a lot of other solutions. It's fast, it's relatively low cost. It does a good first sweep into a data platform and figuring out what's wrong, etc. So in general, it's good for detecting the technical service level data quality issues like freshness, volume, schema drift, etc. However, you're leaving a big part of the information or a big part of the puzzle, which is you're not catching anomalies at the data level. For example, you're not taking incorrect data, you can detect nulls, and there's very limited context for business logic, which is what I said earlier is one of Sifflet's strengths and differentiators in the market today, is that we also look at the business logic. So there is some metadata based monitoring in Sifflet that's going to cover the use cases that I mentioned, meaning like freshness, volume, schema drift, etc. But we also do other types of monitoring. And so speaking of other types of monitoring, we mentioned log-based or pipeline monitoring, which is going to be more related to the logs or analyzing the logs, orchestration, metadata, jobs, success, failure, etc. And that's also something that's going to be covered to an extent under Sifflet, and I'm sure a lot of other vendors. But this is, looking at it purely from a pipeline perspective without going into deep inspection of the data, without, getting visibility into like the context of the data and the accuracy of the data, etc. So you can't dissociate one or the other, but generally speaking, you'll find like this covered as well under most data observability platforms today. And then finally, there's looking at the data itself, which is going to be from like a technology perspective, a bit trickier and will require a lot of, or like a higher threshold of guardrails around security and all of that, which essentially will, query and scan the actual data, sampling the data to figure out where potential anomalies can be and how to get ahead of them. So that's so I would say, to answer your question, obviously each approach has a pro and con, but a platform like Sifflet would have a mix of the three approaches.
Sometimes what happens is that when you look at the actual data, some customers already are afraid their cloud data warehouse cost has gone up a lot. And
yes,
like
it can be expensive.
Right. So, and also it can slow down the operational data, like queries, so, so how, in that case, can you make a copy of data, or because that's also not a good idea to make a copy?
Absolutely.
How do you avoid that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a traditional optimization problem, and I think there's a lot of ways to fix it with technology and make sure that you're not doing anything that's redundant or costly or so there's a few ways to do it. Like you can, for example, do a first scan, and then the next scan is going to be only looking at the delta or only looking at certain thresholds or anything like that. So you can get creative around it, but the idea is not to explode the data warehouse or the cloud bill for the customers when they're doing monitoring.
That's great. By the way, I have to say that I picked a spot that I thought was brilliant, but to record this.
No, it's amazing. I love it.
Oh, okay, good. The sun is setting, so that changes. People are walking by, so I hope this.
No, it's great. It's actually really cool. Like it's it's a good spot.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on. Let's talk AI, because we haven't talked about AI. So I have two questions about AI. What is the role of AI within your product, that is using AI for data observability and enriching or whatever? I'll let you talk on that. And secondly, can you observe AI itself, like LLMs? And so any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny that your question, the way you ask your question, is in two folds because that's also how we see it at Sifflet. So we call it, we have two, components or two projects, AI for Sifflet and Sifflet for AI. So that's exactly what you described. So AI for Sifflet is how we internally use LLMs to improve user experience and to improve how the monitoring is done and to bring a higher level of automation, especially in our case where we come with the promise of also democratizing data quality and bringing it closer to an end user that's not necessarily technical. And so LLMs come with like a great level of flexibility there and in making the product more accessible. And I can go into a bit more detail about it. And the second part is Safety for AI. And this is the big umbrella of use cases and products where Sifflet helps our customers to advance their AI project and agenda, whatever that means. And again, I'll go into a bit more detail about that. Let's talk about AI for Sifflet, which is my favorite topic at the moment. Because as you can imagine, space is moving really fast, and there is a lot of exciting things that can be done. And I do think that AI is changing software and changing how people interact and expect software to behave, and data observability and broadly speaking, the data infrastructure is no exception to that. I think we're going to see a lot more integration of AI and use of agents into the data stack. So to give you a bit of a teaser in terms of AI for Sifflet, and we have some announcements coming up. But essentially, if you remember what I said in the beginning in terms of how Sifflet the product is built, so we also pull documentation and context and description from different applications, which makes us or which makes the monitoring more informed, but it helps us put the data asset in a business context as well, right? So kind of taking that further is making sure that the product can also allow for semantic awareness and what we call contextual data quality, meaning you have the information, you have the semantic information that you need. How do you translate that into a workflow and a process around observability, with making sure that the right metrics are put in place, the right processes are put in place, the right thresholds for monitoring are put in place, etc. So that's one area to look at it. We have actually a AI Copilot that we launched last year, which does a lot of cool things. For example, we have a very popular feature where you can use natural language to set monitors. So it's building product components that take us in that direction of making the product more accessible to less technical users. And then kind of taking that further, we like everything that happens beyond setting the monitors and beyond setting the anomaly detection workflow is do we want to move into a world where there's like self-healing pipelines or automated remediation, or there's suggestions for different fixes and things like that. So a lot of themes like this is what I'm exploring with the product under this AI for Sifflet umbrella, and we're going to be using more and more agents into servicing or serving the promise that we bring, which is democratizing data quality and making it more accessible to more people within the organization. So more to come on this. I'm trying really hard not to spoil the roadmap.
I know you're trying to hold yourself back because your team would be like, no, you're not supposed to say that. That's still on the roadmap. So you are based in Paris, but you're in London to attend an AI summit. I'm curious, what are you going?
I am, yes.
What do you expect to learn from there? And also, one topic that I'm really excited about is how do we expand the data observability into unstructured data? And what I mean by unstructured data is like, there's raw tags, emails. How do I know that, this is a credit card, this is a social security number, or uh,
Yeah.
or observe that data for personal information? So is that on your roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with that question if you don't mind, because that's part of Sifflet for AI. So Sifflet for AI is everything around, monitoring of unstructured data, monitoring of, potentially in the future, model behavior and a lot of that good stuff. But definitely starting with monitoring of unstructured data and moving from a place where you monitor structured and semi-structured data in tables or open formats or whatever to a model where you're looking into data that's stored in a vector and used in a different way, etc. So that's definitely something we're also working on, and there will be some announcements on that very soon as well. But I think definitely it's a low hanging fruit for data observability platforms to go
Yeah,
into unstructured data, right?
yeah.
It's
Right.
um,
So you
especially
are,
now with
yeah,
technologies like Snowflake, Cortex, and
yeah,
I think
correct.
it's making it more accessible to move in that
Right.
direction.
Right. So you touched upon yet another favorite topic of mine these days, which is open table format, because you mentioned open standards. So Apache Iceberg, Hoodie, Delta, they're all pretty, like Lakehouse concept is catching on quite a bit. In
Yeah,
fact, a lot of customers have now said, if Snowflake is too expensive, maybe I can move some of the workloads to object store like S3 or Google Cloud Storage or Azure Blob Storage, and then I can put a table format on top, like Delta or Iceberg. How is Sifflet supporting these open table formats?
yeah. That's another excellent question, and another favorite topic of mine at the moment is this whole revolution that's taking place in the, broadly speaking, the data warehousing, data lake housing space. I do think, to your point, traditional cloud data warehouses have become cost centers rather than value centers. And so I think that a lot of folks are looking for ways to push processing upstream. And that's where like new framework, not new frameworks, but these frameworks come into play. Um, and I think, back to how I described observability earlier, is I don't see data observability platforms as, like point solutions or something that's tied to one specific use case. If you did a good job as a vendor at building your technology and your product foundation, then your bread and butter is connectors and making sure that you have a solid framework that can allow you to retrieve all sorts of information from different connectors and different behaviors of the data platform. And so whether you're looking into the data at the warehouse or pre-warehouse or, in like, how it's being processed upstream into a lake, or the pre-ingestion process or whatever. Then if you've done a good job as a vendor, you should be able to connect already to those to those steps in the data processing workflow. So that's definitely, to answer your question, that's definitely something that we do, and I'm a big fan of how the space is evolving. And I do think that offers more flexibility to customers, but also opens more, or opens the door for even more scrutiny around data quality, right? Like with the whole rise of data products, like now you want to know, or you want to be able to um, define and codify data quality checks as early as possible in the pipeline. And so I think this whole movement is a positive evolution of the traditional analytic workflow, for like a better words. I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So I want to change tracks here because we've talked quite a bit about standards and technologies, but I want to understand, how is Sifflet deployed? There are organizations that are saying that as the volume of data increases more and more, we sometimes don't want to move it into the cloud. So they want to observe data where it exists. Just like we're bringing
Yeah.
compute to data, can I bring observability to data? Is it running, since I'm at KubeCon, is it running in Docker containers or orchestrated by Kubernetes or
Yeah.
multi-tenant, serverless, bring your own cloud, BYOC? How is Sifflet? What are the different options?
Yeah. So to give you kind of a more straightforward answer, Sifflet is a multi-tenant technology, right?
Okay.
Built on Kubernetes,
Okay.
okay? And with privacy and security in mind, because in the very beginning, we knew we wanted to address like a enterprise type of customer.
Mhm.
One and two, data observability is such a touchy topic that you need as a vendor to have, the max level of privacy and security in your infrastructure and how you deploy, right? And so in terms of deployment types, we are cloud agnostic. I think we're one of the few platforms today that's cloud agnostic and runs on a multi-tenant type of architecture. We have data centers everywhere in the world. And we allow deployment in SaaS, obviously, which is our most popular type of deployment. But we can also deploy via agent. We can deploy in VPC, so self-hosted. And we can obviously deploy across different cloud technologies. So yeah, it's something that I'm glad we had the right judgment call in the
Yeah,
beginning.
that is great. So because if you containerize it, then it's easy for you to move it from one cloud to another. But is it always a SaaS?
Absolutely.
Can I run it? Can I run Sifflet on-prem?
Sorry, I missed the last part.
Can
Can
I
you run
run,
CTA
can
where?
I run on premises?
Well, I mean, again, since we are built on Kubernetes, technically you
Yes.
can.
Right.
However,
Yeah.
we don't do it
I see. Okay. Okay. No, I know
because
most.
it just defeats the purpose. Yeah, I mean, it's a go-to-market choice not to
Yes.
deploy on premises, to be completely honest.
Yes.
And we have the agent that kind of
Yeah.
semi bridges the gap. We can do private link. We can do a bunch of things. But the idea is to, like work with like modern cloud
Got it.
technologies.
Awesome. But you do have connectors to even
Oh yeah, yeah,
traditional
yeah.
system,
Traditional
right?
data
So
warehouses. Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. As I said, like
yeah,
we connect to Oracle, we connect to
yeah,
Hadoop, we connect to
yeah.
SAP.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, perfect. Who are the buyers of Sifflet? Are these technical people or are they business people? What skills are required to use a product?
Yeah. So the users of Sifflet, as I said, Sifflet is a solution that's built with the goal of democratizing data quality and demystifying data quality. I'll give you a very concrete example and one of our most popular features.
Hmm.
We have this Chrome extension, right, that goes on top of business applications, for example, on top of your BI tool, and gives you as the end data consumer, someone who's in C-level or someone who's in marketing or business leader, gives you real-time insights into the quality health status or the data quality health status of the assets that are important to you, right? That's for us a way to say to like an end user, hey, we know data is a transactional product. You know it's important to you. You don't need to speak to the data engineer who has a very long backlog already. Here's the information served directly to you, right? And if you want to know more, you can, like the Chrome extension can take you back to Sifflet, and Sifflet is a very user-friendly platform that's built with even the least technical users in mind. So you can find out more. If something seems off, you can click on a link and it takes you to a Jira or a similar platform to create a ticket. Whatever level of detail you are comfortable with. But we do believe in bringing that knowledge to the end user directly, because 99% of the times when we're speaking to prospects for the first time, we ask them why are we having this conversation. They say, oh, because I'm the last one to know. The business always calls me and says, oh, there's something wrong with the data, and we're the last to know, and we look stupid, right? So that's a way for us to bring that visibility of like, hey, like, you know what's going on. but you also know that the data engineer or the data team is working on it because you can see the owner of the data asset. You can see who is working on like data quality monitors and things like that that are related to the asset, etc. Um, so the users of Sifflet can go from the most technical data engineers, data architects, etc., all the way to random Joe in the business, right? So that's really our strength. Um, Now, in terms of the buyers, typically it's going to be like a chief data officer, chief data analytics officer, chief data AI officer, CIO, because these are going to be the folks that are going to be responsible for, the budget around data infrastructure in general, but also going to have to answer to the business needs in terms of, data quality, availability, governance, etc.
That's great. So I have one last question, and then I want to change tracks once again. But my last question about the product is, can you talk to us about who are some of your marquee customers? And also, I'm very curious, what are some of your biggest deployments? Just to get an idea of the scale of your product and deployments.
Yeah, without, because it's a bit confidential, as you can imagine. We do work with one of our customers is the largest data lake for GCP in Europe.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Another one of our customers is the largest Snowflake customer in EMEA and top 10 in the world.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
So very high
Yeah.
volumes of data,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, in terms of landmark customers, as I said,
Yes.
where we've been very lucky to work with some really great enterprises and amazing people,
Yeah.
really visionaries, because as we said in the beginning, like data observability is a new category and it takes a special type of data leader to understand that, this is important and it's changing, but at least like a couple of years ago, it needed a certain level of forward thinking to see that data is becoming transactional product and that observability was a non-negotiable. So we work with we're very strong in retail. So we have a lot of retail customers. We're very strong in media. So we work with BBC Studios, Penguin Random House, Dailymotion, etc. We're very strong in financial services and in pharma because these are like regulated industries. Um, so um, so yeah, quite a few interesting use cases and industries, and really blessed to be working with such huge corporations.
That is amazing. So, Salman, with that, we are getting so close to the end. So, I have some personal questions, if you don't mind.
Please, of course.
All right. So, please tell me, what is your perspective of being a female CEO working out of France with your clients being all over the world? So,
Yeah, yeah. Look, I really don't mind this type of questions. So,
okay.
in fact, I actually think these questions should be asked more often because
Thank
I
you.
do believe in setting an example, right? Like, I'm
Yeah,
not gonna come on here and pretend that I'm not, different or I am, right? And it is what it is, but it doesn't prevent me to, do what I want to do and have the ambition that I have. And you know what I mean? Like, I think it's very important to have this kind of narrative and lead by example so that hopefully younger generations can take example and see that it's possible. I do come from a kind of a like an interesting background in the sense that I have two younger sisters. My dad is a
mm,
huge feminist, and so we've always been encouraged to go after our dreams and dream big and all that. And I never and mind you, I grew up in Morocco, so Morocco. But I was never made to feel that I could, or I couldn't go after my dreams because of the fact that I was a female. And so I went to an engineering school and in Paris, and we were, I think, 16% females. And then I worked at Goldman and like, again, very male dominated environment. But honestly, even with that, like I've always had the belief that yes, as a female, I'm different. I have different reaction to things and I have different, maybe physical and physiological abilities. Um, but it doesn't make me less, smart or less hardworking or less, ambitious. And I think it's a matter of channeling, your strength and your weaknesses regardless of your gender, and just go after your dreams. So it's
Very
uh you
inspiring.
know
Yeah.
thank
And
you very much. And I've had really good female role models throughout my career, which led by example and showed me that
right.
it's not, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not rocket science, but it's doable.
What mistakes have you made as a CEO and hence lessons learned? And finally, what moments are you most proud of?
Oh my gosh, I make mistakes every day. That's how you learn. I mean, I can be very candid with you on this. We started the company just a bit over 3.5 years ago. I come from an organization that has a very strong culture, um, and where culture is a really like a differentiating factor almost. And so when we started Sifflet, maybe I underestimated that, or I thought that, oh, like it's just gonna be, it's just gonna be the same, and it's just gonna create itself. It doesn't, and so it's very important to make sure that you invest in the right processes and the right nurturing and the right people and repeat the same thing and all of that to make sure that it really becomes like almost ingrained in the way people think and behave. But I've gotten really really lucky because I have a really amazing team and really amazing people at Sifflet that have made this culture creation journey not just my problem, but a global and collective effort. And I do feel very lucky to have some of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my career working at Sifflet. So but it's definitely an area that you know I thought it was going to be more straightforward than it is.
It never
Mhm.
is. And by the
Never
way,
is.
yeah, talking about like amazing people that you work with, I was amused to hear that you have hired a chief happiness officer.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What is
The
that?
hire of the year.
Hire of the year.
Oh, she's fantastic. Um, she's yeah, we did hire a chief happiness officer. She's amazing. She's like an in-house therapist, and yeah, I mean, she's here to make sure that we create an environment of, because early stage startups are very
Yeah,
special, right? Like
yeah.
there's a lot of everything is high stake, everything is urgent. We all want to succeed. We all want to, be better than our competition and all that. And it's very important that there is someone that
Mhm.
looks after everyone, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Um, in fact, like sometimes I come to the office and I'm like, hey, like I need a one-on-one session because I need to talk about my happiness with you. And that has been honestly, it's been a
Wow,
game changer.
I
Yeah,
see.
no, the best hire I made.
Oh, wow, wow. This is amazing. So much to learn from you. Uh, Final two
Thank
questions.
you.
Words of advice to people who are listening to this and some key lessons that you'd like to impart.
Yeah, you mean for like someone who's like
Like
a
who
founder
wants,
looking to
yes,
start a
who want
company?
to start a
Yeah,
company like you. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Just go for it. Just
that's
go for it to make mistakes and learn fast.
right.
Honestly, it's this is something I always, say to my team is it's the problem is not making mistakes. You will make mistakes all the time. The
Yeah,
problem is not acting fast enough to recover from the mistake and to learn from the mistake and not having
amazing.
enough self-awareness to really learn from the mistake
Right.
and move on. But move on is the most important part.
Keep moving. Keep moving.
Keep
Amazing. Thank
moving.
you so much. Final question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Tell us something about yourself that the world in general does not know.
Uh, I'm a huge book reader and I read
Oh,
fiction strictly.
I see. Oh,
I
really?
read, yeah, yeah, yeah. I read like one or two fiction books a week. Yeah,
Wow.
because I
What
have
kinds?
ADHD and that's how I channel myself.
Wow. Can you give us some
Yeah.
examples? Like what books, like favorite authors?
Yeah, of course, I have a few favorite authors. One of my favorite books ever is The Boys on the Boat.
Oh, yes. What
Uh,
I've read that.
Amazing resilience
Yes.
story.
Very inspiring.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, I really like Trust. by Hernan Diaz.
I
Is
see.
also one of my favorite books. I recently read Educated. It's like a Mormon story. It's really, really inspiring. Um, so yeah, I read a ton of books and I strictly read fiction.
Wow, this is amazing. Thank you so much, Salma. This has been
Thank
an
you, Sandeep.
absolutely fabulous podcast. Loved every moment of it. Looking forward to seeing you
Likewise.
again in person. But thank you, viewers. It's been a pleasure having you on this episode. Till next time, see you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.